During the course of those 2 years, I've had the chance to come out and be on field trips of sorts with folks from the Open Space Authority. And on occasion, I've had a chance to talk to some of the folks that have been studying some of the migratory patterns and of the animals going from the Santa Cruz Range to the Diablo Range. And I remember them mentioning that there certainly are culverts and there are some small spaces, not enough spaces for animals to get across to the other side of Monterey Road and the other side of 101. And I also remember hearing that unfortunately some animals get on the roadway to traverse this dangerous span of roadway here and oftentimes don't make it. And obviously that's a very dangerous proposition for many drivers that make their way through here. I think once this was known as Blood Alley, right, Osh? And unfortunately, it still keeps a lot of that, just given the animals and other things that happen along this roadway. And so what we thought during the last budget cycle, I thought, well, are there any signs? If you drive down through here, you'll see some signs that say watch for flooding, other such things. But I, in conversation with Helen Chapman from my office, who's a huge park advocate and open space preservation advocate, we began having a discussion about what we could do to make folks more aware as to the animal crossing that exists in different parts of this roadway. And so one of the things we came up with is approaching folks from the Department of Transportation and seeing if we could fund the purchase of these signs with our budget dollars, with our office dollars, and the answer was yes. And so part of what we did was then, venture out and work with the Department of Transportation, Laura Wells, who I hope is here. There she is. She's going to be up and ready to speak soon. But we began planning and trying to figure out how many of these signs to put up, where to put them up and such. And so that's why we're here today. Now, I've been married a long time, and you're probably wondering, what the heck does that have to do with being out here? But what I've learned is sometimes it's the small things that matter most. And although these signs are small in size, and it was certainly very low cost, I think they add tremendous value, and they are very super important. And with the recent passage of Measure T here in the city of San Jose by the voters of San Jose, this, in combination with spending close to $50 million to provide some much-needed preservation and purchasing of land here in the valley, is going to be very important. And that combined together, I really think, points to a very strong direction and as it relates to the preservation and the recognition of the beauty and the importance of the space that we stand here today.
There are a lot of important people here today, important elected officials and dedicated professionals and nonprofit organizations and public agencies that are working day in and day out to preserve this amazing landscape that we're standing on, and I want to thank them right off the bat. These signs that we're going to unveil in a moment are really about increasing public awareness that Coyote Valley is home to wildlife. Bobcats, badgers, coyote, deer, mountain lion, they live here and they move through here. And like people, they need safe ways to cross roads to get between their home ranges and their habitats. So this is about increasing awareness for drivers that wildlife are here, and let's try and reduce the unnecessary wildlife vehicle collisions that are taking the lives of beautiful creatures every day throughout the year. We're placing the signs here in the Coyote Valley because the Coyote Valley is a wildlife hotspot. It's one of the last remaining corridors where wildlife can move from the Diablo Range behind you to the Santa Cruz Mountains to my right. And in doing so, move to over 400,000 acres of protected habitat that we, the voters, public, private funders, have contributed over $3 billion to protect habitat in these two mountain ranges. This is the last missing piece. This is the puzzle piece. And as wildlife needs to move to adapt to climate change, we've got to protect Coyote Valley, and we've got to make sure that these creatures can safely get across these roads. Just this year, the Open Space Authority partnered with Peninsula Open Space Trust and leading scientists to create a vision for the protection of this unique landscape that we call the Coyote Valley Landscape Linkage. What does it do if we implement it? Wildlife can move and have safe passage between protected open space lands. We can protect the groundwater aquifers right underneath our feet for clean drinking water for our people. We can support local farmers growing food here right in Coyote Valley. And we can build the resilience of our communities to a changing climate. I would say that's a pretty darn good return on investment right here in Coyote Valley. Lastly, I want to just say that we're thrilled to be part of a dedicated partnership of public and private partners that's called the Technical Working Group, that's working on making sure wildlife have safe passage through and in the Coyote Valley. It's led by the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, and it includes an amazing diversity of infrastructure agencies and nonprofit organizations, and I just want to call them out. Of course, the Valley Habitat Agency, the Santa Clara Valley Water District, Valley Transportation Authority, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Santa Clara County Parks, Pathways for Wildlife, Peninsula Open Space Trust, and of course the Open Space Authority. These dedicated conservation planners and scientists, water and transportation experts have all contributed to placing these signs at this particular location. Why? Because 54% of wildlife killed along Monterey Highway or through the Coyote Valley get killed here on Monterey Highway. And so that's why these signs are where they're located. That's why we're all working together to protect the Coyote Valley. And again, thank you all for being here today for what we hope is the beginning of a lot of important steps for Coyote Valley. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm very honored to be here today, and our department was very honored to be a part of the installation of these signs. I do want to express appreciation for both Gally and Mark from the Open Space Authority. Their input very much informed the look of the sign that you're going to see very soon. Want to do a bit of bragging. These are custom designed signs. I think it's safe to say that there are no other signs in California or possibly the nation that have the look of these signs. I also want to acknowledge Joseph Tran, who is here today. Joseph, can you raise? He's in the back. One of our young engineering technicians who had the joy of going through many different iterations of the sign until we finally said, yes, this is the one. We're hopeful and excited that these signs will have a positive benefit. San Jose, do another little bit of bragging. We're one of the safest cities in the nation relative to traffic safety. Our injury crash rate is about 1/3 of the national average. However, the reality is there are people and animals who still die on our roadways and are severely injured. Monterey Road here, you see it's a pretty fast road. It's one of our priority safety corridors, which means it's one of the 3% of our roads in San Jose that have the highest incident of people dying or being severely injured. And again, we're hopeful that these signs will play a small part in improving the safety for the animals, for the wildlife, that as drivers drive through, they notice where they are. So as we're improving the safety for the deer, the bobcat, and those two-legged creatures in their metal shells, as they're going very fast, we're hopeful that they step off the gas a little bit and improve their own safety as well. Even though I do want to point out to Councilmember Jimenez that even with the modest budget of $915, we're very careful stewards of how we spend money. And we only used about half of it. So Open Space Authority, Councilmember, if there's a need for 2 more, we can put those in.
And how exciting that there's a little bit extra money left for more signs. You're all being very dutiful and watching us when there are raptors flying. This valley is absolutely beautiful. But we stand between 2 significant barriers to what we're trying to overcome, and that is the ability of wildlife to be able to transit this corridor. But there are other significant barriers that have been in the way. The development that's planned for the Coyote Valley, the other changes that people want to see here. And let's talk about the importance of the signs. It seems like a small investment, and it seems like a very small first step, but I think it's more important than that. because most of the people transiting this corridor and to the north of us are millions of people in a very urbanized environment. And if we want them to understand the value of wildlife corridors, the value of preserving the Coyote Valley for wildlife, for the agricultural economy that it can represent, for maintaining the open space, then they need to see in a real basis what that means. And the signs are a real significant step for that. Because hopefully it's not just, oh, we have to worry about wildlife, but they're designed a little bit differently to make people think about why are they there. They're there because of our shared responsibility for moving people around, but also letting the wildlife move around. And for example, the Santa Cruz Mountains, which are to our sort of south and our west, and the Diablo Mountains have always been a place of significant biodiversity. When we put these barriers up, that's a threat to that biodiversity. So that's why we put in corridors. Santa Cruz County is now putting in a wildlife crossing at Laurel Curve for the mountain lions and the deer that transit there. Highway 17 has become an even more significant barrier than Monterey Road here has become because of traffic safety concerns, and too many animals have been killed there. And we have isolated populations of mountain lions now between the east and west side of Highway 17. Those animals, because of that wildlife crossing and this wildlife crossing, will be able to share their genes out of the Santa Cruz Mountains across into the Diablo Range, and hopefully as we continue some of these projects down to the Gavilan Range to the south. That's the importance of this. That's the significance. It starts with some signs. It starts with a vision of Councilmember Jimenez to be willing to come forward and raise awareness of the populace here, a very urbanized populace, on what these corridors can mean. It's not just open space, but it's significant to our ability to live and enjoy in the Santa Clara Valley, this little slice of the Coyote Valley. So congratulations. Thank you all for being out here. This is momentous to me, I think, for a lot of us to see some of the signs go up and the recognition that the signs really represent.
Well, thank you, Sergio, for your leadership. I want to thank everyone who's here today, recognizing what we've acknowledged as a symbolic step forward in unveiling of the sign today, but represents a broader commitment of a convergence of communities, of nonprofits, of government organizations to recognize this valuable habitat. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues from the Assembly, Shikara, Mark Levine, who you'll hear from, who's visiting us from the north, Mark Stone, who you just heard from, and again, thanks to Sergio for his leadership. I also want to thank Andrea and all of those of you working with the Open Space Authority, also the Committee for Green Foothills, which has been a vital partner in trying to protect the Coyote Valley. You know, we read a lot about climate change and climate action, and it's often looked at through the lens of planet impacts, national impacts, but when we bring it home, part of climate change and manifest here in California through drought, increased temperatures. We know about fire risk and flood risk. The way it affects habitat in drought is they have to expand their radius of normal breeding grounds and habitat in search of water. And that leads to an expanded radius that our local wildlife need to pursue. And that's again where the Coyote Valley becomes this critical connector between the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Diablo Range. You know, I'm old enough to remember when this was Highway 101 and it was known as Blood Alley. And it was a very fatal roadway for cars and drivers. And now we have 101, which is the main bypass, but there's still a lot of traffic here. And the center divider provides a very important protection for drivers to prevent head-on collisions. It saves human lives. But these center dividers have also posed tremendous risk to wildlife, because when they come on the road, they hit that barrier, and instead of being able to transit, they then lope or wander up and down where they become sitting prey for high-speed vehicles. So that's when you look at some of the maps back there in the tent, some of the longer-term plans of doing more underpasses. The one that Mark Stone talked about on Route 17 to protect mountain lions and deer and all wildlife, to protect them from these dangerous roadways. So I had to joke with Mark Landgraf earlier, Landgraf, when we unveil this sign, who's going to teach the animals how to read the signs? But I guess first, we've got to teach the drivers what these signs mean. They do mean slow down. They mean beware. And for us, for this convergence of communities, these signs are symbolic and representative of our continued commitment to protect the Coyote Valley from development, to protect our habitat and wildlife. I was the proud author a couple of years ago establishing California Wildlife Day every year on the day of the spring equinox. And we recognize the importance of wildlife to our broader ecology, to human habitat and survival, and it's our wildlife habitat that become the early markers of impacts of climate change, etc. So again, thank you all for being here. Thanks for the convergence of partners. And as we unveil this sign today, we will all rededicate our commitment to protecting and preserving our valuable wildlife habitat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Jimenez, for your leadership on this. You've got amazing advocates from your city council. Your assembly members, Ash Kalra, Mark Stone, Senator Monning, are the tops for advocating for your community as well as for advocating for wildlife. I'm Mark Living. I represent Marin and Sonoma, and I am overjoyed to be welcomed into your community on this day. Thank you. You've got great leadership that got us to where we are. I want to say thank you to Mark Landgraf, who has represented your Open Space Council numerous times up in Sacramento, for helping to bring me here. And I want to say, I didn't know when we passed AB 498 that, in fact, as the councilman had said, he mentioned wisely earlier about the small things. And so we passed this bill back in 2015, but in June, when we passed the Water and Parks Bond on the ballot, tens of millions of dollars for wildlife corridors were in that proposition. So we are getting state funding for wildlife corridors and to recognize them. And so hopefully we'll be able to do more to protect wildlife, do more to preserve these corridors. We know that with climate change, that we know that with development, that we know that there are risks to our wildlife and to our ecosystem, and we are wise to preserve and protect them. I want to say thank you all so much for being here and welcoming me here to celebrate with you. Thank you.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. It's so exciting to be here. I wrote a beautiful speech and I looked at it right there and I accidentally hit delete on my phone, so it's gone. So we'll see how I do. So Committee for Green Foothills, we've been working to protect the open space and natural resources in San Mateo and Santa Clara County since 1962. We've been a fervent advocate for the protection of Coyote Valley since it was first threatened in the late 1970s, early 80s. It is just beyond exciting to be here today at the opening of this sign. We launched just a year ago our protectcoyotevalley.org campaign. Please look at your phones, not right now, but at the end, protectcoyotevalley.org. It's not hard to remember. We are just a few hundred signatures away from hitting our goal at the end of this year of having 5,000 signatures for the Protect Coyote Valley campaign. So thanks to all of you who've already signed it. It is so exciting to know that we have so many people that stand with us. If you're here today, you're already doing so much to protect Coyote Valley. I know it. Whether you've just joined the campaign this year, or the effort this year, or you've been working on it for decades. I see so many of you around the table right now. You've been working on this since the 1970s, since the 1980s. So thank you all so much for all that you do. Today is a little bit surreal for me for a lot of reasons. Coyote Valley was actually one of the very first campaigns I got involved with. My mom was bragging. She didn't brag about me, Laura. My mom was one of the designers of the sign, so it's just a part of the thank you, Mom, for what you did. And then it's also just it's just so exciting to be here at the opening of a wildlife crossing sign, at the groundbreaking of this, rather than the groundbreaking of a industrial warehouse or some sort of other use that we don't want to see down here. So I think I'll leave it at that. Today is, for me, it's really just a reminder of the power of people coming together, and that together we can truly impact some amazing change. So thank you for standing with us for Protect Coyote Valley, and thank you, Sergio, and the assembly members and council members and all of you. We love you.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here, and it's very inspirational to see such a great turnout. I'm from upstate New York. This is summer for upstate New York, so this is a cold day for Morgan Hill and San Jose. And I was saying I should have put some long underwear on. I don't have cold weather creds anymore. I've been in California now for 13 years, and one of the things that distinguishes California from a lot of the other states is sort of the commitment to endangered species recovery. You look at the Bay Area and the series of parks and wildlife reserves and open space areas, it's pretty astounding when you look at the rest of the country. There's some isolated, you look at Chicago and the Indiana Dunes, and there's great local efforts certainly around the country, but California in total and the Bay Area and specifically, it's pretty amazing. So it's exciting to see this from a resident and somebody who is from another part of the country, to see it come together. So as the representative of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, we're charged with endangered species recovery, and this wildlife connectivity is critical to the biodiversity, as the senator and a couple of the assembly members mentioned. And we're implementing a natural communities conservation plan, which is, again, something very unique. We're also implementing a federal habitat conservation plan, which is focused on endangered species. But when I meet my colleagues from Florida and Texas and other parts of the United States, there's nothing quite like this at the state level. So hats off to the state of California when they implemented this program in the 90s. And its focus is landscape ecology, connectivity. So to think that this all started with some De Anza students and some wildlife biologists, they started focusing people's attention on wildlife connectivity in this valley. And now we're in discussion with high-speed rail about constructing wildlife crossings. There's discussions with the city and the highway agencies about trying to make this corridor what we use in ecology permeable for wildlife, for they can get from A to B, sort of like we do. And the parks people talk about, hey, how can we get people from Coyote Ridge to Coyote Valley open space property? So I think whatever connectivity happens, I think humans will benefit from it too, and they'll be able to move in these recreational corridors also.
It looks like someone brought some cold wind from Buffalo. Well, it's great to see everybody here. It's a wonderful day, and everyone that knows me knows that I love Coyote Valley, and always have. And to see so many people come together to protect this valley, and we do it for a lot of reasons: sustainability, water, climate change issues, agriculture, but really foremost for me is the preservation of our wildlife and our animals that live amongst us, and we make their lives difficult sometimes because of it. And so I'm so grateful to be able to serve with outstanding legislators, and to have Assemblyman Levine here, as you heard, he represents Marin and Sonoma County, clearly an area that's beautiful and needs a representative and a champion like Mark to protect. And so we're very grateful that his advocacy in his district really is a benefit to the entire state. And being here, when I was on the council, I also benefited from working with Senator Stone and Senator Monning, and now to be able to work and serve with them in the legislature is a joy, as two of the greatest champions that we have in the state for our environment, our open spaces, and certainly our coastline as well. And the reality is that for the three of us that represent this region, we are so lucky that when we're in Sacramento fighting, that we have so many champions here that are fighting right here on the ground, doing the difficult work, the advocacy, fighting back against development, fighting back against really bad decisions. And it gets tougher and tougher every year to do that, but we've been successful because of the advocates, and foremost amongst them is Councilmember Sergio Jimenez. You know, when you move from your council seat and you want someone to take your place, you want to make sure that they uphold the same values. And I gotta say, Sergio has been an extraordinary champion for the environment and for Coyote Valley, and we all benefit because of it. So thank you, Sergio. And there's a number of organizations we've heard from when I was on the council. Of course, we started the Habitat Agency, and to see how effective it's become, I think it's beyond even our expectations. And so we're so grateful for the Habitat Agency, the Committee for Green Foothills, and so many other organizations that have been fighting every single day, as long as I've known them, to preserve our environment. And finally, I want to thank the Open Space Authority. It's been such a joy to work with them at the legislative level after having the opportunity to work with them at the local level. And, to know that really they're standing between us and many times peril when it comes to some of the open spaces we have here in Coyote Valley and throughout our region, it makes me feel at least some sense of comfort that we have that positive force that is working on our behalf. And so before we get a chance to see these beautiful signs, I'd like to invite my legislative colleagues to join me in presenting a certificate of recognition from the Assembly to the Open Space Authority. And I'd like to ask the Open Space Authority board members to join us up here as well as we present the certificate of recognition, along with Andrea to join us.
These signs, they really signal to the community and to many of you here that Coyote Valley, we're moving in the right direction, and that there are many advocates, many wonderful organizations that truly care about the wildlife crossing here, and more importantly, preserving Coyote Valley as we see it here today.